Like and subscribe may look simple to you, but for us, it's very valuable. So make sure to support us, and thank you for watching.
Nick and Helen are a happy couple in North Carolina with 2 sons, Brendan and Lucas. Brendan, the older son, excels at hockey and has been recognized as the best player on his high school team, making his family proud. In contrast, Lucas, the younger son, is more emotionally expressive and passionate about art. While they engage in friendly banter, they share a strong bond. Nick, a successful businessman, creates a nurturing home, and despite the sibling teasing, the family dynamic is loving. Brendan's hard work in hockey has led him to become a professional NHL player. On the evening of an important game, Nick drives Brendan to the arena, eagerly anticipating his son's performance. Each time Brendan scores a goal, Nick is filled with overwhelming joy and pride, celebrating his son's accomplishments. As they drive home from the game, Brendan shares his ambitious plan to take his hockey career to new heights by moving to Canada. Nick, trusting in his son's skills and determination, fully supports this decision. However, during their drive through a high-crime neighborhood, the family faces an unforeseen challenge. As Nick and Brendan were driving home from the hockey game, they encountered a perilous situation. 2 cars began swerving at high speeds near them, which frightened the family. Eventually, their cars ran out of fuel, so they pulled over at a gas station. While Brendan went into the store to get a drink, Nick took the opportunity to inform his wife, Helen, about Brendan's plans to move to Canada to further his hockey career. However, their peaceful interlude was shattered when a group of thugs arrived at the store and proceeded to burglarize it. The gang members, adhering to their twisted initiation ritual, demanded that the new recruit kill a random person to join their group. To Nick's horror, the random victim was his own son, Brendan. Terrified but under coercion, the reluctant new gang member sliced Brendan's throat with a machete, following the leader's orders. Witnessing this traumatic event, Nick immediately sprang into action, ambushing the attacker and knocking off his mask, revealing his identity. The young assailant managed to flee the scene, only to be struck by a passing car. Nick rushed to his son's side and took him to the hospital, where the rest of the family gathered. Tragically, Brendan did not survive the attack, leaving the family devastated and heartbroken. The next day, Nick identified the killer, a 23-year-old named Joe, during a police lineup. The funeral was held on a gloomy, rainy day, but the family's grief seemed far from subsiding. The parents struggled to sleep, and Brendan's footage played incessantly, causing Lucas to break down in tears every time he reminisced about his beloved brother. Determined to ensure the killer received a harsh punishment, Helen urged Nick to take action. The following day, Nick met with Detective Wallace and the district attorney, only to be infuriated when he learned that the defense was seeking a lenient sentence due to a lack of evidence to take the case to trial. The family's ordeal was further compounded by the fact that the gas station's security camera had been broken, leaving no video evidence to support their case. When Nick learned that Brendan had been killed as an initiation fee for Joe to join the gang, he was outraged. At the pre-trial hearing, the judge asked Nick to testify about Joe as Brendan's killer. However, Nick surprisingly refused, claiming that due to the darkness, he was unable to clearly observe the killer's face. This unexpected move left everyone dumbfounded, and the judge had no choice but to dismiss the case, resulting in Joe's release from custody. As Joe walked out of the courtroom, he casually lit a cigarette, seemingly untroubled. At that moment, the gang arrived, praising Joe and welcoming him into their group. The gangster leader, Billy, even suspected that Nick was spying on them and started chasing after their cars. Joe was rewarded with a prostitute and a sizable amount of cash by Billy as a prize for his achievement. Disappointed by the lack of justice in the legal system, Nick was later seen searching for a weapon, determined to take matters into his own hands. When Nick returned home, he revealed to his family that the boy had been released due to a lack of evidence. He then pretended to leave something at the office, but instead went to confront Joe. As Joe emerged from the building, he was surprised to find Nick waiting for him. In a fit of rage, Nick attacked Joe, and a fierce fight ensued between the two. As they struggled for survival, the confrontation ended with the knife accidentally stabbing Joe's body. Nick witnessed Joe lying in his own pool of blood. Afterwards, Nick drove to a remote location and disposed of the bloody knife. When he returned home, Helen noticed his injured hand and provided him with a bandage. They both broke down in tears, but Nick had now become both a killer and a victim in his quest for justice. Elsewhere, Billy, a member of the gang, pays a visit to Bones, his superior, to hand over the money from the gas station robbery. However, Bones chastises Billy, criticizing him for the low amount of cash and dismissing him. Billy then returns to the gang's hideout, where his men are engaged in cooking methamphetamine, the main source of the gang's illicit activities. There, one of the members, Body, informs Billy that Joe, the gang member who had killed Brendan, has died. Shocked and enraged by this news, Billy confronts the rest of the gang, berating them for not showing proper respect to Joe. The gang members then discuss the possibility of rival gangs seeking retaliation for Joe's death. Meanwhile, Detective Wallace visits Nick and informs him that Joe, Brendan's killer, is dead. The detective is intrigued by the bandage on Nick's hand, suspecting that he may be linked to a retaliatory act. At their hangout bar, the gang continues to celebrate Joe's life, believing he was a good soldier. However, Billy arrives and reprimands them for their lack of respect. The gang then discusses the potential threats from rival gangs who might have killed Joe. One of the gang members reveals that his sister had seen a man in a suit the night Joe was killed, and the gang members identify this man as Nick through a newspaper photo. Body is then dispatched to track down and eliminate Nick. Unaware of the impending danger, Nick reapplies a bandage to his hands. Body attempts to shoot Nick, but Nick manages to disarm him using his suitcase. Seeing this, Billy and his men open fire in the crowded street, creating a chaotic scene. Nick flees into a narrow alley with the gang members in pursuit. Billy relentlessly shoots at Nick, forcing him to abandon his suitcase in order to run faster and survive. Nick eventually makes his way to a parking lot where he triggers several car alarms to confuse the gang. As Nick reaches the top floor of the parking lot, he becomes trapped in a car with one of the gang members. In a desperate attempt to escape, the car reverses and plunges off the multi-story parking structure, killing the gang member. Afterward, Nick receives a call from his wife, Helen, informing him that their son, Lucas, has disappeared. Meanwhile, Detective Wallace arrives at the crime scene and discovers the victim, who is another member of the same gang as Joe. Nick finds Lucas at the location where Brendan was killed, and Lucas, overcome with grief, berates his father for always prioritizing Brendan over him. Nick argues with Lucas to take him home, and they eventually return home safely, where Helen embraces Lucas, begging him never to leave home like that again. The following day, Bodie, a member of the gang, shows up at Nick's office and returns the suitcase that Nick had dropped during the previous chase. However, Bodie also threatens Nick, warning him that he has the right to know how he will die before being escorted out by security. Upon opening the suitcase, Nick finds a family photo, which implies that the gangsters plan to kill his entire family, but not him. Agitated by this revelation, Nick calls the number found in the case, which belongs to Billy, the gang leader. Billy warns Nick that he has signed a death sentence for his own family. Wasting no time, Nick calls home and warns his wife, Helen, and son, Lucas, to stay inside the house. He then contacts Detective Wallace, briefing her on the situation and requesting backup forces. When Nick returns home, he locks up all the windows, leaving his family baffled and in a state of panic. Shortly after, Detective Wallace arrives and reminds Nick that he is the one who has started a retaliation, jeopardizing his own family's safety. The detective asks Nick to confess to the murder, as the officers are about to protect his family anyway. However, Nick refuses. Later that night, as the family sleeps, Nick is awakened by a car alarm outside. He discovers that the two officers assigned to protect his family have been brutally killed. In the blink of an eye, he finds the gangsters inside the house. Nick manages to survive the onslaught of gunfire, harming several of the gang members severely. But the ordeal ends when his family is taken captive by the gang. Mercilessly, Billy shoots and kills Helen and Lucas, leaving Nick devastated. A few days later, Nick is recovering in the hospital. He considers himself guilty for the deaths of Lucas and Helen. It is revealed that Helen has died, but Lucas is still alive, though his fate remains uncertain. Knowing that his son Lucas is in a coma, Nick rushes to the hospital to be by his side. He apologizes to the unconscious Lucas, acknowledging that he has never been a good father. The detective is surprised to notice Nick escaping through the hospital window. Nick arrives at his home, which has now become a crime scene. The following day, he goes to the bank and empties the family's bank account, converting it to cash, as he no longer has a family left. With the help of his co-workers, Nick then locates the gang's hangout place. Arriving at the cafe, Nick asks the bartender about the gang and offers him a significant amount of cash. However, the bartender ignores him and even insults him. Enraged, Nick begins beating up the bartender and a bystander who tried to intervene. This confrontation ultimately provides Nick with the information he needs, including the whereabouts of Billy and the address of Bones, the gang's superior. Nick then goes to Bones' place. Initially, Bones shows no interest, but upon seeing the bag of cash Nick has brought, he changes his mind. Nick takes several weapons, including a shotgun and a handgun with plenty of ammunition. Before Nick leaves, Bones reveals that Billy and Joe are his sons, and he already knows that Nick plans to kill Billy. Nonetheless, Bones assures Nick that he cannot cause him any harm. With the weapons in hand, Nick returns home to familiarize himself with their use. He then shaves his injured head and retrieves Brendan's jacket, the one he was wearing the day he died, and puts it on. Determined, Nick heads to the gang's hideout. Upon reaching the gang's location, Nick smashes the door open with the shotgun, startling the gangster inside. The gangster, thinking Nick was dead, is left dumbfounded. Nick dismisses the other woman present and holds the gangster at gunpoint, demanding that he call Billy. Billy, realizing that Nick is still alive, is alarmed by the gunfire, which indicates that his man is dead. Bones and his elder son then meet up, and Bones warns Billy that the situation is getting out of control, instructing him to stop fighting Nick. Rather than heeding Bones' warning, Billy ruthlessly shoots and kills his own father. Undeterred, Nick then breaks through the gang's hideout entrance, shooting and killing one of the gangsters in the car before the man could even reload his gun or attempt to flee. Nick then steps into the building, narrowly escaping death a few times as he systematically eliminates the remaining gang members, one by one. Finally, only Billy is left. Approaching Nick, Billy sarcastically reminds him that he must be out of weapons. However, when Nick pulls out another weapon from his pocket, Billy's eyes fill with tears, realizing the futility of his situation. Nick then proceeds to kill Billy. With the gang members all dead, Nick returns home. He starts watching the old family videos, awaiting his inevitable arrest. Detective Wallace arrives and informs Nick that Lucas has started showing signs of life in the hospital. However, the detective expresses her fear that Lucas, now a 14-year-old with no one to support him, may become a gangster due to the overwhelming trauma he has endured. Despite this glimmer of hope for Lucas, Nick is consumed by the profound depths of his own misery, the weight of the losses he has suffered, and the actions he has been forced to take.
And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our recap. Watch other recaps on the screen. Like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.